Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Lefty Agenda. I hope everyone is avoiding the death grips of capitalism as best they can. In a world that is filled with pain and suffering, it can be easy to get the leftist blues and think that nothing will ever improve and we're all destined to a life of misery. We try to enact change and stand up for what we believe in, and it seems to not be going anywhere. Well, I feel this existential dread on the daily, and one thing that helps me feel better is to talk about some of the things that aren't as shitty. That's why today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite leftists and folk singers from history, Pete Seeger. Seeger is possibly one of my favorite people that's ever lived on this earth, and I wanted to share some of his life story with you. So let's get into it. Part 1. Early life. Pete Seeger was born on May 3rd, 1919 in New York. His father was a Harvard-trained composer and musicologist, and his mother was trained at the Paris Conservatory of Music. Pete grew up around music and music lovers his entire childhood. Pete attended Harvard and actually wanted to be a journalist, but Harvard did not offer the courses for that at the time. He did, however, join the banjo club, and it is believed that at this time he began to lean more into radical left-wing politics. Pete joined the Young Communist League in college, and after he dropped out, he moved to New York to pursue his career as a musician. The book, The Folk Singers and the Bureau by Aaron J. Leonard is a huge source for much of this video. In the book, Leonard states, Pete Seeger, whose entire life was one of dedicated commitment to matters of human emancipation, something for which he paid an enormous personal and professional price. Part 2. The Almanac Singers. After moving to New York to pursue music, he began meeting other singers and songwriters with similar views. Pete met Lee Hayes and Millard Lampell, and they decided to rent an apartment which became known as the Almanac House. The three of them, as well as some of their other friends, started playing and singing together until they officially became the Almanac Singers. This included Seeger, Lampell, and Lee, as well as Woody Guthrie, Sis Cunningham, Bess Lomax Hawes, Josh White, and others. They kind of came in and out of the group whenever they were available, though the core founders and members were Seeger, Lee, and Lampell, also Guthrie playing a large part as well. The first collections of songs they released was titled Songs for John Doe. This was during the period of the non-aggression pact between the Soviet Union and Germany during World War II. Many of these songs are anti-war as well as anti-racism and pro-union. The Communist Party would later change its stance on the war when the Soviet Union joined in with the Allies. Songs for John Doe attacked big businesses like J.P. Morgan and DuPont for supporting German rearmament and then turning around and trying to get government contracts with the United States to expand its own military. Some of the songs and lyrics on Songs for John Doe are very telling. This song is called The Ballad of October 16th. When my poor old mother died, I was sitting by her side, a-promising to war I'd never go. But now I'm wearing khaki jeans and eating army beans, and I'm told that J.P. Morgan loves me so. This song's called C for Conscription. Well, it's C for Conscription, and it's C for Capitol Hill, and it's C for the Congress that passed that goddamn bill. Another called Billy Boy. Do you want a silver medal, Billy Boy? Don't you want a silver medal, Charlin' Billy? No desire do I feel to defend Republic's steel. Don't you want to see the world, Billy Boy? Don't you want to see the world, Charmin' Billy? No, it wouldn't be much thrill to die for DuPont in Brazil. As you can see, the Almanac Singers were not scared to speak up against the U.S. government and big business when they didn't agree, which would become the downfall for many of the leftist singers, unfortunately. The second collections of songs was called Talkin' Union, which received some very negative reviews from the New York Times for being communist propaganda. As you probably can piece together, it was a collection of pro-labor union songs, including some lyrics like so. This song's called Which Side Are You On? They say in Harlan County, there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. This song's called Union Maid. There once was a Union maid, she never was afraid of goons and ginks and company finks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the Union Hall, when a meeting it was called, and when the Legion boys come round, she always stood her ground. From what I can gather, the Almanac Singers disbanded when a good portion of the folk singers either joined or were drafted into the military for World War II, including our friend Pete Seeger. This was after the Non-Aggression Pact was abolished with the Soviet Union. It's a shame that folk and country has the reputation that it does today. Folk music used to be about inspiring social change, and now it's mostly just white guys with man buns singing about trees. But I digress. Part 3. People songs. While in the military, Pete Seeger came up with the concept of people songs. He believed music had the ability to create real social and political change, and wanted to create a way to spread people's songs to as many working class people as possible. Established December 31st of 1945, the idea was directly influenced by the Workers' Music Association in Britain. People Songs published a weekly newsletter with songs, articles, and announcements. Its association with Pete Seeger and the Almanac Singers, as well as some other groups, gave it a very communist leaning, which would prove to be its downfall as the Cold War tensions became bigger and bigger. Seeger was the editor of the newsletter, and People's Songs even campaigned alongside progressive candidate Henry A. Wallace in 1948, making it one of the most musical campaigns in history. People's Songs would last until about 1949, but suffered bankruptcy at the hands of the anti-left and anti-labor government and the media. It did breed a successful magazine called Sing Out, which lasted into the 70s. There's a lot of complex situations that were going on during this time. The government began cracking down on communist newspapers, cafes that were known communist hotspots, as well as the party itself. The inner drama of the party also was not helpful during this time, since it seemed to constantly be switching ideologies as well as having leadership changes. Of course, in classic leftist style, they fought each other more than they fought against anything else. Part 4. Pete Seeger versus the FBI. It's no secret the FBI and the US government in general wasn't too keen on the Reds at this time. It's astonishing how closely the FBI kept tabs on this innocuous group of folk singers. Referring back to the book, The Folk Singers in the Bureau, Aaron J. Leonard was able to obtain 1,761 pages from the FBI file on Pete Seeger using the Freedom of Information Act. And that's most likely not even the entirety of the file, just the information that was declassified and they could give him. After the government crackdown on the U.S. Communist Party, the folk singers began being called into court one by one to testify to the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC. HUAC would pressure the singers to sell out their other Communist Party members and friends, and once the press got a hold of the story, they could kiss their music careers goodbye. Some attempted to disown the party or downplay their involvement. Pete Seeger was called to testify to HUAC in 1955 after being under continuous surveillance by the FBI. Federal agents even approached him one time after dropping off his kids at school to attempt to arrange an interview. He was unapologetically still associated with the Communist Party even if he wasn't an official member any longer. And during the trial, he pleaded his Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate himself or the other folk singers around him. He lived with a potential contempt of court charge over his head for the next 5 years because of this, until in 1960 when the charges were finally dropped. Things weren't looking up, though, because he was blacklisted and labeled subversive for his affiliations. The FBI never ceases to amaze me on how much manpower they put into very innocuous issues. The amount of resources the FBI has wasted in its lifetime is astounding. Look up their response to the song Louie Louie by the Kingsmen if you want more examples of that. Part 5. Pete Seeger's ideology. Pete Seeger was an amazing man who believed in many different things. He was dedicated to the rights of the common people and the worker. By now I'm sure you know he was incredibly pro-union and didn't believe that anyone should have to go without their basic human needs met. He was a communist, and he did believe in bettering the world through communities rising up and meeting the needs of the people around them. He believed music could bring people together and share ideas, and push forward the dream of a better human society. He was also strongly anti-racist in a time when that was far less common, and he shared the stage with many black folk singers of the time, including Leadbelly and Paul Robeson. A good example of this is the Peekskill riots, which is a striking reminder of the racism and hatred geared towards black people and anyone associated with them back in the early 1900s. On August 29, 1949, there was planned to be a concert in Peekskill, New York. It was a Paul Robeson concert, and a group of racist, fascists, and anti-communists crashed the event, which he would be performing at, along with Pete Seeger and many others. The mob overturned cars and beat many people, mostly black and Jewish men, to stop the show from happening. The show was a benefit concert for a bunch of fellow communists who had been indicted for their involvement with the party as part of the Smith Act. This would be a dark foreshadowing of the anti-left hatred to come, not only from the American people, but also the government itself. Later in life, Pete still supported unions and, of course, was an advocate for workers. But he also played a key role in cleaning up the Hudson River and was very influential in that, and would continuously support environmental causes up until the day he died. He died in 2014 at the age of 94 years old. He left a legacy on the world bigger than I think he would have ever known and ever thought that he could. And yeah, that's all that I have for you. That is a brief look into the life of Pete Seeger. Again, one of my favorite folk singers and just activists of all time. I definitely suggest that you look up his music, whether it's solo music by just him or the Almanac Singers, or he was briefly in a group called the Weavers as well. It's just very inspiring to listen to, so I definitely think that it's worth giving a listen. Other than that, you have a great rest of your day and keep trying to overthrow the government. Bye.